Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Please post your comments to be part of the narrative. We know there's so much going on in Florida politics, and especially in the Republican Party here in Florida. As most of you know, Mike Levine is a very strong voice at the state level, and he has a lot to say about what's going on in Tallahassee. So I'm going to bring him right on this morning. Welcome, Mike Levine.
Hey, Chuck. It's great to be with you this morning.
Super. Governor DeSantis has begun appointing people to some open positions. It seems like he's pretty much appointed the entire cabinet. Blaise Ingoglia is our CFO. Thought we'd start out with Blaise Ingoglia. What are your thoughts on that position and his being our new CFO? What the ramifications of that might be in the not so distant future?
Okay. Well, Chuck, I think most Floridians look at these positions independently. So, for example, most people would think that if you're the chief financial officer of the state of Florida, the reason you got the job, well, number one, it's an elected position. And of course, Ingoglia was appointed. Okay, so that's kind of a very interesting nuance that we're talking about right now. But most people would say that the chief financial officer of the state of Florida should have deep financial experience. Can you agree with that, Chuck?
I think I could agree with that, yeah.
I mean, why would you want a guy running a $125 billion budget to be a guy with very little financial experience? But that's what you got. I mean, Blaise Ingoglia is a builder. So Blaise created his fortune by building houses. And he was a small builder, not Lennar or D.R. Horton or Richmond American. It was like Blaise's little local building company. And he was successful, and I give him credit for that. And just for the record, I like Blaise Ingoglia. I really like Blaise Ingoglia. And I like what he's doing as the CFO for the most part. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that now. I mean, today. But you would think that the CFO would be a guy that had really deep financial experience. Like, for example, Rick Scott ran Healthcare of America, which is the largest healthcare provider in the state of Florida. Rick Scott, his best characteristic as governor of the state of Florida was his ability to manage the finances and to a similar degree the economy. And while I'm not saying Blaise Ingoglia can't do that, I am saying that his resume doesn't reflect his ability to do that. He's a small builder.
Yeah.
Is what he is, with no experience managing budgets anywhere near, not even in the direction of the budget, including, Chuck, don't forget, the investment of all of the state of Florida's reserve accounts, like the pension fund and stuff like that.
Right.
So my point is that 2 points to be made here, Chuck. Blaise Ingoglia, by the way, the G is not pronounced, Blaise Ingoglia, was appointed by Governor DeSantis, and his resume does not reflect a deep experience in financial management of large institutions like the state of Florida, which is one of the largest economies on the planet standing alone, Chuck.
Yeah, right. So do you feel like there's some sort of ulterior motive for his appointment?
So you interpreted my comments exactly as I hoped you would. There's definitely an ulterior motive. And as we go through the other appointments, we can talk about each of those, or we can talk about them cumulatively or separately. Your call.
Well, let's do them separately first. So Blaise is on the chopping block there. He's on the altar. So
Okay.
So what are your thoughts there? What's the whole purpose of putting him in that position?
Well, another point that I'd like to make, Chuck, about this subject is that all of these people are ambitious. So if you think that Blaise Ingogglia's glory hallelujah position as a CFO, you're sadly mistaken. And I would suggest that Blaise Ingoglia really never had on his bucket list to be the CFO of the state of Florida. That is purely political. So, you know, really, Chuck, and there's no way to restrain this conversation just simply to the appointment of the CFO, Blaise Ingoglia, by Ron DeSantis. You also have to take a look at this through the lens of the gubernatorial race coming up, which is the most important thing for everyone involved, including the people of the state of Florida. The question is, who is going to be our next governor?
Correct.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, Chuck, that I haven't heard anyone else make the inference that Blaise Ingoglia could possibly run for governor. Okay. But when I saw Ron DeSantis appoint Blaise Ingoglia to the CFO's position, that was the first thing that popped into my mind, that Blaise
Really?
is going to run for governor. And I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want people to walk away from watching this live stream or recording saying that Mike Levine said that Blaise Ingoglia is running for governor, because I have no evidence of that whatsoever. But my instincts tell me that that's a possibility. And then if you want to, Chuck, we could close out this conversation and start talking about last night's appointment of Jay Collins to the lieutenant governor job.
Yeah, before we get into that, what about the new replacement of Doge with FAFO, the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight? That was a Blaise Ingoglia deal, and do we really need a new government agency for that?
That's a great question, Chuck. I would like for our viewers to put this into context. Since Ron DeSantis lost the primary against President Trump in the presidential primary here in the state of Florida, and keeping in mind how nasty that primary was, one thing I want people to remember and know that almost no one really knows is that the DeSantis administration, through the Republican Party of Florida, effectively had Trump boxed out of being on the ballot in Florida through a rule that was passed at the Republican Party of Florida, who does control who can run as a Republican in the state of Florida. Everybody needs to understand that the Republican Party of Florida decides the process by which Republicans qualify to be candidates on the ballot. And the Republican Party of Florida passed a rule that said any Republican that wants to run for president in the state of Florida must sign a loyalty oath, saying that if they lose the primary, they will support the victor in the Republican primary. And Donald Trump was very clear for a long time that he was unwilling to sign that loyalty oath.
Correct.
So when the Republican Party of Florida passed a rule that stated that Republican candidates for president of the United States had to sign the loyalty oath in order to get on the ballot in the state of Florida, that was the DeSantis organization utilizing the Republican Party of Florida to box Trump out of the ballot in Florida, which made it very difficult or almost impossible for Donald Trump to win the primary. There was so much public outrage about it that there was a protest at the following Republican Party of Florida quarterly meeting that was sufficiently influential to cause the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida at that time, Christian Ziegler, to repeal the rule allowing Trump onto the ballot And then, of course, they made some concessions that said, we won't do it this time, but we'll do it next time. Okay, so that's to be played out in the 2028 election cycle. And I also want to bring to your attention, Chuck, before we move on from this subject, that Christian Ziegler, term, was removed from his position as the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida. Now, you could think back to the scandal that removed Christian Ziegler from his chairmanship, but you could also, again, this is my gut instinct, that the scandal was created as retaliation against Christian Ziegler for allowing that rule to be repealed, Chuck. So everything you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, has some context in truth and also some context in political warfare, Chuck.
Yeah, getting back to Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, do you feel like that is an agency that we really need, or are there other options?
Okay. Thank you for bringing me back to the point. I really appreciate it. But I did feel like the viewers needed to understand how vicious this cycle, this government is. So to get to the Financial Agency for Fiscal Oversight, remember that since, as I pointed out in the beginning, that since Ron DeSantis lost the election, the legislature has turned on him. And that was represented by with the legislature through Joe Gruters, who should be also on our talking points for today if we have the time, crafted the Trump Act, which was the application of federal immigration laws in the state of Florida. So the point is that before Ron DeSantis lost the election, the primary election against Trump, the legislature did everything that Ron DeSantis wanted him to do. Ron DeSantis was well known in insider circles for being an extraordinarily heavy-handed governor who mandates everything he wants with very little discussion from anyone, including the Florida legislature, running all of the provisions, everything that gets done in the state of Florida through the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. And that's it. Okay? So my point is that the Florida government today forces everything down the throats of everyone involved, which is a very authoritarian governance style. And we've seen that with the Live Local Act and other things that we've talked about. So now you take a look at what Ingoglia is doing, and Ingoglia is the wingman for Ron DeSantis today. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that could change when the power deck gets reshuffled. But the point is that the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight is a mandate coming down from another strong-arm tactic, and you could argue the most strong-arm tactic that has been leveraged by the DeSantis administration onto everyone else in the state of Florida who thinks in any way differently than they do. So for me personally, Chuck, I like the idea that the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight purpose or mission is to make local government agencies more accountable. I don't like the idea that it's coming from the state of Florida and moving the citizens of our cities and counties farther away from self-governance, Chuck.
Yeah, which is a root of republicanism itself. The farther away government is from the people, the less Republican it is. So I get it. Were you suggesting though that this fiscal oversight could be more from the public, having each county required to have oversight from some sort of a company other than
Yeah.
government?
Right. And again, just keep in mind, Chuck, and I know this is something that you and I talk about all the time. You ask me a question, and then I go back into all of this supporting monologue or dialogue, about, and I don't really answer the question directly, because I don't think people can understand the answer to the question if they don't understand the background. And that's why,
Sure.
Chuck, I often, get into why building the case. But the long story short, Chuck, when you take a look at it, this is one thing that the Florida legislature under Ron DeSantis has no problem doing. They create these agencies that cost the state of Florida. Each agency costs the state of Florida hundreds of millions of dollars to operate. And then they don't apply a funding method for it. Those are unfunded mandates, Chuck, against local governments. Okay? So here we go. And, it's amazing to me because I know Blaise Ingoglia fairly well. And Blaise is really, really smart. But he hasn't spent a lot of time. Like, for example, while he's trying to hold local government accountable, he's creating an agency that's going to cost Floridians $100 million. That is a sustained expense. It's going to be ongoing. Basically, it's going to be a non-discretionary expense going on in perpetuity. So I challenge Blaise Ingoglia, my friend, I would say. I mean, maybe friend's a little dramatic, a little, more ingratiating than what our relationship actually is. But I mean, we respect each other, okay? Blaise Ingoglia and I go back a long time. So I would like to, I know that I know that I respect Blaise, and I believe that Blaise has a level of respect for me because we've been through some things together that we're not going to talk about right now.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Mr. Ingoglia, if you ever have a chance to watch this live stream or the recording of this live stream, I challenge you to put your fiscal responsibility thinking cap on and figure out how to bring city and county governments into fiscal responsibility without spending $100 million a year of Florida taxpayer money. My recommendation would be that we pass legislation and possibly a constitutional amendment that would require all government agencies to be audited by private sector auditors that are not selected by them.
There you go.
CFO Ingoglia and Chuck Benoit. That's my point. So I think I've covered it. Do you agree, Chuck? Have I covered it?
I do think we've covered it. And let's move on to another appointment. Jay Collins being appointed just recently as our lieutenant governor. And I think you you mentioned at one point that you thought they were going to possibly disband that whole lieutenant governor position. And now all of a sudden we have one Jay Collins, who is now appointed as our lieutenant governor. What would you like to say about that, Mr. Levine?
Okay. Well, it is interesting, right, that Governor DeSantis, I'm pretty positive that legislation was filed in the Florida legislature to eliminate the lieutenant governor position in the 2025 legislative session. So the governor doesn't really think he needs a lieutenant governor, which I agree. I don't believe the lieutenant governor position carries any weight. I mean, it's an assistant to the governor at best, but none of the governors recently have really turned to their lieutenant governor for much, other than politics possibly. So this is a situation where Governor DeSantis took a look at his chessboard and said, what resources do I have at my disposal to advance my political agenda and the political agenda of those people who I'm going to suggest to you, Chuck, have entered into political alliances with me so that we can advance our political careers together. And that's what motivated Governor DeSantis to fill the lieutenant governor job. And he selected Jay Collins to that position because there's a lot of chatter about Jay Collins running for governor, Chuck.
There you go. So again, what we're doing.
So there you go. Political chessboard. Is Jay Collins the best person to be the lieutenant governor of the state of Florida? And people can answer that question any way they want. You know, Jay Collins is an amazing guy. You know, he is a disabled, retired veteran, and I've met Jay Collins on a couple of occasions, and I believe that Jay Collins is very concerned about the lifestyle of everyday Floridians, which is very rare in a Florida politician. So Jay Collins, based on past experience, is a legislator with principles. Yet, like every other legislator in the state of Florida, he doesn't buck the system. So when the Speaker of the House comes down and tells him which way he needs to vote on a particular issue, he typically does what he's told, like all the others do. And I'm sure that they'll give you rationale for why they do that. But the question becomes, what kind of a governor would Jay Collins be? Because he would have shed the shackles of leadership in the legislature, and he would be the boss, and then they would be beholden to him instead of him beholden to them. And until you put that person into power, Chuck, it's very difficult to predict what they will do with it. And I'll turn this over to you.
For sure, for sure. Well, you know, we still have James Uthmeier, who was appointed to the Attorney General position. Do you have any comments on that before we get too far into this?
Well, it's interesting because Uthmeier, most people probably don't know, unless you really stay in touch with it, was Ron DeSantis' chief of staff before being appointed to the Attorney General slot. And Uthmeier is a young lawyer. So I'm saying to you that that appointment as well is teeing Uthmeier up for future office. And of course, he's a young man. I think he's less than 40. And he's already the Attorney General of the state of Florida. And you could ask if Uthmeier was the best person to be the Attorney General of the state of Florida. And you can give him credit for being smart, and you can give him credit for being, you know, a true conservative. I would say that Uthmeier is a true conservative based on what we've seen so far. So I'm not just saying he's not a good person, but, you know, Chuck, one thing that really is kind of, as I now am an old man and a senior citizen, I'm starting to appreciate the value of experience. And you're not seeing a lot of experience in these appointees. So let's go back. Ingoglia, no experience really in financial management of large institutions. And then you get Jay Collins, which does not have the experience of running a state with a $125 billion budget, as great of a guy as he is. And then you take Uthmeier and you can put him in the same bucket. He's a young guy, great guy, but doesn't have the experience of running a $125 billion institution, plus all of the other reserve accounts and all the other investment accounts and things like that. The state of Florida is a monstrous financial institution. And these three appointees, in my opinion, from a 66-year-old guy, looking back, say the experience is not really there. And inexperience, even though well-intentioned, does lead to mistakes, Chuck.
Yeah, we get that. So I think one of the kind of the overriding topic of today's discussion is all these appointments that Governor DeSantis has made. I think that leaves us with Joe Gruters. Well, actually, Joe Gruters is
okay.
now
But before
chairman.
we move on to Joe Gruters,
okay.
Chuck,
Yeah,
I need
okay.
to tell you something. You know, the cabinet member. We've talked about all the cabinet members except one.
Yeah, I had that out of order, right? Wilt Simpson, the Commissioner of Agriculture, he was not appointed by DeSantis. Is that who you would like to discuss now?
I just want to, make the point that Wilton Simpson is not appointed by Governor DeSantis and has made it very clear that if he sees a pathway to winning the gubernatorial race, he'll take it. I've talked to insiders who are close to Wilton Simpson who tell me, and of course, this could be political posturing or maneuvering, that Wilton Simpson, because of the Trump endorsement of Byron Donalds, Wilton Simpson does not see a path to being elected as the governor of the state of Florida. So that has thrown a wet blanket on his aspiration to be the governor of the state of Florida elected in the 2026 election. But I'm going to also say, Chuck, just off the top of my head, that when you look at all of these people, Wilton Simpson's the most qualified, even though he's probably my least favorite of any of the potential. Well, you can get into Byron Donalds, which we're not going to do today. But I'm saying to you, from an experience standpoint, Wilton Simpson was the president of the Senate. And Wilton Simpson comes from a huge agricultural family and has a long history of running the budgets of the state of Florida. So if you wanted to make a case for who's the most qualified to be the governor, I would suggest to you that Wilton Simpson's resume answers the question. Wilton Simpson of the batch is the most qualified to be the governor, Chuck.
Yeah, qualifications don't seem to matter too much, I think, at this point, but I guess I see your point. Yeah, we're actually kind of coming down to the last minutes of our time here, and I thought maybe we'd jump to the Trump versus DeSantis Republican Party as the Republican Party moves forward. What's the deal there? What do you feel? Is there a strain there? Are they really genuinely looking in the same direction? Give me your perspective.
How much time do we have, Chuck?
Well, we're down to the last few minutes, but we go over.
Okay, well, that is a really perplexing situation, right? Because again, you get into it, and Trump was elected in November and took office on January 20th. But on January 7th, Governor DeSantis called for a special session of the legislature in order to implement Trump's immigration policy in the state of Florida. And then Florida Senator Joe Gruters, who was Donald Trump's campaign manager, or not manager, but the campaign chairman in the state of Florida in 2016, and that's another whole story. We could do another whole show just on that. But, he's been in the good graces of President Trump since then, whether he deserves to be in the good graces of the president or not. That's another conversation. But he does enjoy, obviously, President Trump just endorsed him to become the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and he has no opposition, which means Joe Gruters is the chairman of the Republican National Committee. And Chuck, remember that Joe Gruters is on the ballot running for the CFO position that DeSantis overlooked him for and awarded to Ingoglia. So you could say that Gruters is favored by Trump, and that is well known to Governor DeSantis, and Governor DeSantis appointed his political ally, Blaise Ingoglia, to the CFO position. But then Trump, of course, now whether it's directly related or not, so the way that played out was that Gruters got appointed to be the Republican National Committee chairman, and Gruters is embracing that position.
Yes.
So the point is that while Gruters' policy, the Trump Act, was far less supportive of President Trump's immigration policy, I would suggest it undermined President Trump's immigration policy, and DeSantis's immigration policy was much more in line. And the president and Tom Homan, the border czar, would say that the DeSantis immigration policy is the strongest immigration policy in the country.
Yes.
And Joe Gruters' immigration policy actually undermined Trump's immigration policy. Yet you can see the dichotomy, Chuck, that Trump's opponent or Trump's counter Republican, Ron DeSantis, is more in line with Trump policies than Trump's chosen supporters like Joe Gruters. And it's really confusing as to why that is allowed to exist, Chuck.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of things about politics that are very confusing. And hopefully, our little live stream this morning has shed some light on some things that others may, again, feel are very confusing. So I guess we are out of time. So why don't I give you an opportunity to do some sort of closing remarks, Mr. Levine?
Well, thank you, Chuck. And I would just say to all of our viewers and the world that we are in extraordinary times. I mean, President Trump is reinventing the world, as we all can see, and we can go through the checklist of all that he's doing, but particularly economically. And, you know, if you follow the money, ladies and gentlemen, that's the thing you can rely on. If you want to know what's going on, follow the money. And power equals money. So, and this is my friend Chuck brings into, you know, this conversation natural law and restoring our American Republic through our biblical principles, because ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, God is in control, and you're seeing it walked out real time in the United States relationship with all of the other countries in the world, particularly the major countries, you know, the most dominant countries in the world, China, Russia, et cetera. So that's what's going on, Chuck. It's really a fascinating time to be alive, and it's a fascinating time to be an American, and it's a very fascinating time to be a Floridian, Chuck.
Yes, it is. And thank you again, Mike Levine, and to all of our loyal followers. Thank you for tuning in to our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic -ROAR, and now on X as well as Restore Our REP 76. So please like and share this program, and remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. See you next time, and meanwhile, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.